Before we start today's video, please subscribe to our new channels, David on China and David Zhang 360. Links are in the description. Welcome to China Insider. Professor Jiang is at it again with the propaganda.
Why don't we go try to have a democracy in China?
So I've been in China for 25 years, and I can tell you there is almost no interest in democracy because for democracy to exist in China, for democracy to happen in China, you would need to have people who respected human rights, individual liberty.
This one is seriously misleading. Chinese people, according to him, don't want democracy because it's not in the Chinese DNA or the Chinese blood. For a democracy to exist in China, you need things like human rights, individual liberty, people who have empathy, who believe in the rule of law. And apparently Chinese people do not. Now, this argument is fundamentally a direct CCP narrative. It is one that they've been using to say that China isn't fit for a democratic style government, instead one where it is totalitarian. Okay? So the question obviously is, are there other examples of similar people who have a democratic system? Well, how about Taiwan? Very similar, right? Chinese generations transformed into a democracy. How about other similar Asian countries in East Asia, let's just put it. South Korea, Japan, Singapore. All vibrant democracies closely related to Chinese Confucius teachings, and although different countries, Singapore being one of the closest, obviously, democracies. Or how about the fact that in China in 1989, during the June 4th Tiananmen Square massacre, we clearly saw student protesters demonstrate the desire for democratic changes, and that happened right before the eyes of Chinese people.
Who had empathy, who believed in rule of law.
Okay, and then the part about empathy and the lack of rule of law, this is somewhat true because I spend a lot of time in my videos talking about the moral decline within China, hyper-materialistic views. This again, though, is not the reality before the Communist Party took over. And even then, with all that being said, you still see widespread public reaction for injustice online and in society. You see online outrage over corruption, you see online outrage over certain social issues, and you still see people, I mean, all of the videos that we source come from Chinese social media. So you still see the expression of, or the resentment towards the CCP and otherwise, right? There's a grassroots mutual support in some cases during crises, and we've seen this with demonstrations, with protests. In many of these cases, you can't generalize something. There's expressions of moral expectations in any society, right? Because that's the hope that people can get, that this can turn around. And so even if this doesn't directly translate or is qualified to translate into a Western-style political structure, it doesn't mean the empathy side or the basic decency doesn't exist. I mean, the CCP tries to wipe it out completely through the introduction of make more money, which I'll talk about in a bit. But the fact that many of these moral issues presented in the videos come from within China shows that people are posting about this and they're mad about it, right? Where Chinese people fail is seeing the source of the problem. They think that this comes from individuals opposite of them. They think that this comes from a certain class inside the circle of ordinary people that's creating these issues. But the CCP is the one that's creating these conditions in the first place, and it's the one that's trying to keep people not thinking higher than those problems surrounding them. And so this can go both ways. You know, the reform and opening up introduced a lot of corruption. The CCP basically said that make money and make lots of it while being corrupt is the way to go. That was the leadership mantra of Jiang, the former CCP leader during the 90s and early 2000s. And so with the other side, right, being Mao Zedong, which through decades of political campaigns, literally killing millions of people to achieve so-called total political loyalty, this back and forth, this pendulum swing from one side to another made people essentially tired and scared of what could happen next. So people simply just started to ignore the idea of transformation, right? At the height of reform and opening up, there was the Tiananmen Square massacre. What do you think people's reactions would be after that? We're going to continue to go onto the street so that tanks can come rolling. The next point that Jiang makes is that Chinese people's ultimate objective is to become a bureaucrat.
That's what all Chinese people aspire to.
Oh, aspirationally, meaning coming up, you want to be a bureaucrat one day.
Exactly. And the higher you climb the bureaucracy, the better, because traditionally, China is an empire. And the way you survive an empire is to become a civil servant. And that's why Chinese work so hard in school, because they want to pass that civil service examination to become a bureaucrat, so then they can provide guarantees and protection to their family.
While it is true that traditionally becoming a scholar through the civil, or as a scholar through the civil entrance exam, you can become an official from a poor intellectual person, but that was far from the only way to achieve success. Being a warrior, being merchants, just as today, businessmen, soldiers, I don't know, anything that you can think of can be successful ways to life. But to blame the fundamental reason why Chinese people don't want democratic changes is because of bureaucratic lust, that is going against the historical context. And the argument is very selective. Yes, China has a long imperial tradition in civil service exams, but so did many other societies, especially ones that have a long history. But later, those developed into a democratic system. Before the CCP took over China was the Republic of China, which also, to some degrees, was a dictatorship, but it still had elements of a democratic system. History shapes institutions, but it doesn't permanently lock a societal future to the current political system in place. If that was the case, we wouldn't have seen Taiwan transform from a dictatorship to a democracy. We wouldn't have seen South Korea transform from a dictatorship to a democracy. And as things can change, to lock it into just that system and discredit any future changes is, I think, pretty. I don't want to be mean, but I think it's just not true. Yeah, so I mean, at the end of the day, what he's talking about here is a result, right? Is the result of decades of political campaigns, brutal murder rampages that left people fearful. Because if you're calling for freedom of speech or the right to vote, you're met with guns and bullets and tanks. People clearly, they're not going to openly discuss this stuff, right? It's the same as when Xi Jinping gets 100% of the vote. Oh yeah, he's totally democratically elected. Now, Jiang's answers assume that 1 billion plus people in China share the same values and aspirations. Again, this is not an analysis, this is overgeneralization. China has workers, entrepreneurs, artists, dissidents, migrants, students, and bureaucrats, right? But to claim everybody wants to become a civil servant is simply false. The private sector alone, there's hundreds of millions of people. There's many, of course, tries to avoid the government side of things, but then gets involved. There's different scenarios, right? Let's specifically talk about the bureaucrats, because to become a top CCP official, it's not actually through civil examination. It's through corruption and bribery. It's your record of achievements, which is built on how much real estate properties did you build last year, how fast was it, how many petitioners did you arrest, how many brutal crackdowns did you commit. These are the achievements for the CCP officials to get promoted. So having a civil entrance exam is really not how you get to the highest level of power. And Jiang goes on to claim that people work hard in school to become a bureaucrat. That's the reality set by the CCP. That's not what the people truly want. In fact, take the offsprings of CCP elites. Many of them hold foreign passports, foreign nationalities. Are they the product of bureaucracy? Of course, yeah. Their final inevitable outcome seems to be to become a citizen of a foreign democratic country. Does that mean the Chinese elites don't want democracy or crave it? They all know that the CCP system is power grab, it's for money, it's for greed, it's for everything that they're telling the people not to do, they're doing it themselves. Jiang's point is that democracy is dependent on some kind of a moral purity test. People must already be the perfect liberal vessel of values that have somehow existed in their blood before they were even born. Then that's the qualification for a democratic system. But in reality, it's often the other way around. When people have these fundamental understandings of how things should be are being repressed, are being told that they should not think that way, or they're being told that they should think a certain way, that's when people start to participate in these debates, whether within themselves or with others, and which in turn turns into a revolution of the system that they're currently in. For better or worse, even the CCP, the communist system, is through a revolution of system changes. Did the people inside those systems think that, oh yeah, just because I don't think I want to be a communist one day, that this will never happen? Well, history shows that it did happen, whether some people wanted it or not. So China's political system today reflects state control, historical continuity to some degrees, and there's a total elite class, and that's very different than most of the regular folks, but it does not prove that Chinese people inherently lack interest in rights, liberty, or alternative systems. What you're seeing is a combination of incentives, risks, and structure, not a fixed national character. So in that same interview, he also said this stuff. He was asked about his relationship with the CCP.
I don't want to put myself in a position where I'm compromised and have to become a mouthpiece for the government. And so my main priority is to maintain my independence, my freedom, because I operate in a gray zone in China where I'm not a Chinese citizen, so I'm not bound by Chinese surveillance laws. And I make content for Westerners, and so I have a lot more freedom to comment about Western society than, say, if I were in Western society, right?
So here's the part that really intrigued me.
And so they want to co-opt me, they want to compromise me and turn me into a weapon that they can use to promote their agenda overseas. I don't want to do that.
Jiang says he doesn't want to become a part of the CCP's soft power reach, yet his content and his ideas, including the point that we just talked about, which is democracy, that's all of his stuff is already in line with the CCP's theories. His own writings are still public on Chinese youth league websites. Whether a CCP official has ever approached him directly or not, I'm not sure. But the thing is, what he's saying is already in line with what the CCP wants people to hear, especially in the West. All right, thank you very much for watching this episode. If you haven't subscribed to our new channels, David on China and David Zhang 360, please do so. Click the links in the description or search David on China or David Zhang 360 on YouTube with no space. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time.